We're going to be taking a look at rare earths with Judith Kinnaird. She's a professor of Economic Geology at WITS. Judith, thanks very much for your time this morning on CNBC Africa. Production of rare earths started in a material way, started in around the late 1950s. So the industry has been quite small, just 60 years of mining. The interesting fact is that rare earths, the name of it is quite misleading. Why are rare earths referred to as rare?
Well, rare earths have been known since around about the 1780s, but they were never of any significance, partly because of the difficulty of extracting them from the minerals that they occur in. And they weren't really of interest until the 1980s. And they acquired the name rare earths. It's a group of elements that there's about 17 chemical elements in the group, and 15 of them are the lanthanides, and then we include 2 other elements in this family of rare earths. But you're right, they are more abundant than elements that we know like tin and silver.
Just looking at, you said thulium and tritium, I don't know if that's the right pronunciation, but just looking at the quantities, the average crustal abundance, nearly 200 times greater than the likes of gold. So they are in fact abundant, but not found in large concentrations. So that's really the
problem.
Issue.
That's the problem. They're not found in huge concentrations. Another problem is that when you find a rare earth mineral, the actual concentration of rare earths in that mineral can only be, may only be as little as 10% to about 70%. But the other problem is that unlike elements like gold or platinum, where the elements occur very simply, the rare earth minerals have a whole range of these different rare earth elements within a mineral. So first of all, there's not huge concentrations of them. Secondly, when you do get the minerals and you can mine them, you've got to then get the separate rare earth elements out. And that process,
that extraction is quite costly.
That is difficult, and we've really only had that technology in the last couple of decades.
Now you mentioned the 1980s, and of course we've had increased demand for high-tech products as we've had clean energy technologies come to the forefront with all issues around the environment becoming more and more pertinent. Also, rare earths used in weaponry. Just let's take us through some of the uses that we see rare earths being used for everyday products and perhaps some more high-tech products.
Well, everybody uses them. You and I use them. They're used in color for plasma TVs. They're used in cell phones, in hard drives, in computers. They're used in magnets, in fluorescent lighting, low emission, low energy light bulbs. They're used for a whole range of things.
Cars?
And hybrid cars is a very important one, which is why China is reducing its output of rare earths, because it wants to make hybrid cars.
Let's touch on China, because that really, their restrictions on exports has really changed the market dynamics and interest in rare earths. You had 2009 China coming out and restricting exports in order to retain the rare earths for their own growth and own economic purposes. Just explain what impact this has had on the market for rare earths.
Well, that's right. China said it would restrict the export of its rare earths because it wanted to keep more for processing rather than just...
Let me interrupt, if you don't mind. And this is important because China currently supplies 97%
that's
of
correct, yes. And so they're keeping back now. Instead of exporting raw materials, they want to use more for processed material and the hybrid cars. And the hybrid cars take 15 to 30 kilos of rare earths each, so that's going to be a huge demand going forward. but we also need rare earths for magnets, for wind generators, and the US and UK governments have identified rare earths as strategic metals because they want them for guided missiles, weaponry.
So weaponry is also, of course, key. The future availability is the big question now. So we've got majority of production and supply taking place from China. Where are we likely to find the next material reserves?
Well, until China became a major producer in the 1990s, South Africa was a producer from the Northern Cape and from California. But what happened was that this huge production from particularly a deposit called Bayanobo on the Mongolian border, the Chinese undercut the prices, so it kind of drove other people out of production. And so at the moment, since May this year, Mount Weld in Australia, the Lynas Corporation has started production and they're sending their concentrate to Malaysia.
Do we know which South African miners are exploring for rare earths?
Yes. There's Frontier Minerals at Sankops-Drift. There's Great Western Minerals at Steenkampskraal, both in the Northern Cape. Then there are companies here in Johannesburg, Great African Consolidated, and Bono looking in South Africa, Mozambique, Burundi, Zambia. So there's a lot of focus now on producing rare earths for the future. In fact, there is some predictions that there might be a slight oversupply in 2013.
But currently we have this supply dynamic taking place, supply being restricted from China and demand, of course, increasing as we have an increased demand for clean energy technologies and weaponry and the likes. In terms of monetary value, can we quantify the value of rare earths against the likes of gold and platinum?
Okay, yes, the rare earths are divided really into two groups, light rare earths and heavy rare earths. And the great demand is for light rare earths, and they're currently between about $100 and $350 per kilo, so nowhere near as precious as gold and platinum. But the heavy rare earths, which are much less abundant and not in such demand, but still very much needed for lasers and such, and they are somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 rand per kilo at the moment. It is forecast that there may be this slight overproduction, so there are suggestions that those prices will fall slightly round about 2013, but certainly not to the pre-2010 level.